All right, so I think Jeremy turned the mic up. So I want to thank everyone for coming to the League of Women Voters Candidates Forum. This evening we will be doing the North Dakota Legislative District candidates for Districts 13 and 45. And the format will be, we'll take written questions from the audience, so hopefully all the audience members received the note cards. It looks like we have a couple volunteers. I'm holding some up there if you did not receive any. When you're done writing your question, just hold it up and someone will come around and grab it. The candidates will be given 2 minutes to give an introduction, and then 1 minute after that when we ask questions for a response, and then at the end everyone will be given 1 minute to do a closing, and we will rotate who we initially ask, who initially answers the question. So we will ask candidate Larson likely to start with the introductions, and then we'll just kind of go on down the line. Lois is going to be timing, so she has the time cards there. And since we do have so many people that we're trying to get through, we really ask that you, keep an eye on the time cards that Lois has so that we can be fair in giving everyone the same amount of time tonight. Just a little bit of information about the League of Women Voters. The League is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed participation in civic affairs. We do have in the back a voter guide that looks at the initiated measures that are going to be on the ballot in November. So if you're interested in learning more about those, you can take a look at that. So with that, we will get underway. And candidate Larson, if you would like to start with the introduction.
I'm Landis Larson. I'm running for the District 13 Senate seat against Judy Lee here, the senator. I'm born and raised in North Dakota. I was raised out in the northwest part of the state. I moved here when I came to NDSU to study engineering. After that, I got a job with Steiger Tractor, which is now Case New Holland. I've been there ever since. Some people asked me to help with the union, so I got involved with the union, and I noticed there was a lot of far left, far right, and everybody in the whole shop suffered. So I got involved and I found out what we could do to work together. And when we did work together, we got a lot of things done. We got a lot of training programs involved. We helped a lot of people, and I think that's what I would bring to the legislature is a little bit of balance and understanding of what the working man has to go through. So I want to thank the League of Women Voters for having us here, and thank you all for coming, and hopefully we have a good night.
Thank you. Candidate Lee.
Thank you. I'm Judy Lee from West Fargo, running for the District 13 Senate seat. Landis and I are bitter opponents, as you can see. But the good news is that those of us who are actually involved with the whole political process actually talk to one another and collaborate on occasion to try to make things move forward, and that's how the business gets done. So we only learn by listening to others and then informing our opinions. My degree is in medical technology. I graduated from UND, and I spent several years in that field and then over 30 in the real estate business. So I've had a lot of exposure to business as well as staying apprised of what's going on in the medical field. My late husband, Dwayne, and I have 2 adult children and 3 grandchildren, all of whom live out of state. I was first elected to the Senate in 1994. I was not looking to serve on the Human Services Committee, but that's where I was placed, and I've been there ever since, and I've been chair since 2001. We've spent a tremendous amount of time on issues from birth to death and everything in between, whether it's screening babies for birth defects, or child support, or foster care, or expanded Medicaid, or long-term care, or community-based services, or figuring out what the funeral payments are. That stuff all comes through our committee. So it's been a pleasure to be there. I have worked hard to learn the topic well and continue to work on it. We've had some really interesting studies during the interim, including one on behavioral health I would love to talk about later. But I thank you for coming and appreciate the opportunity to meet with you tonight.
Thank you. Candidate Brand.
Well, thank you. I'd first like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this event on. I'd like to thank everyone for coming here, my running mates, opponents, and peers in another district to come here and talk about the issues. And I'd like to thank you, the voters, for coming here today to be engaged in the process. I think that's a great thing to have happen here. My name's Scott Brand. I'm running for the House here in District 13. I grew up on a farm just outside of West Fargo, and I'm a product of the West Fargo school system. From going to elementary school at Westside Elementary and then moving to Eastwood, to graduating from West Fargo High School in 2001, to raising my family here. My life has been permanently intertwined with the wonderful community of West Fargo. I'm a local attorney here in town. I'm an Operation Iraqi Freedom veteran. I'm a father. I'm a husband. And I was also a Senator Dorgan intern. There I got to see firsthand what effective leadership can do by working across party lines and getting things done. That's what I'd hope to do if I earned your vote to go to the state legislature. I'm confident that after hearing the discussions tonight that you'll find me to be a quality candidate worthy of your vote, and I humbly ask for your vote this November. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Koppelman.
My name is Kim Koppelman, and I represent District 13 in the North Dakota House of Representatives. Was also elected the same year Senator Lee was in 1994. Currently, I chair the Judiciary Committee and serve on the Political Subdivisions Committee in the House. Those have been my two committees throughout my tenure, with the exception of a 4-year hiatus when I went to the Appropriations Committee and counted dollars. And I learned a lot, but I was eager to get back to policy and thoroughly enjoy the committee work that we do. On a personal level, my wife Tori is in the back of the room. I'm married. We have 3 adult children. We've lived in West Fargo ever since we got married. We selected that community. We grew up in a small town in North Dakota, selected West Fargo as the area we wanted to be our home, and that was 36 years ago. And we've never looked back and never regretted it. I've done a lot of different things, including serving for a while as a teacher. I was the editor of the West Fargo Pioneer, had a few stints in journalism. But for the last 30 years, and I know I'm dating myself, you're thinking, well, you were 10 years old when you started doing that. I've owned a business, and it's called Koppelman & Associates. It's an advertising, marketing, and public relations agency. And as I mentioned, for the last 20 years, I've had the privilege of representing the citizens of District 13 in the legislature. I'm thrilled to be part of the legislature in a state like North Dakota because we do it the way our founders intended. Both our national founding fathers, those that founded this great country of ours, and those that founded our state of North Dakota. And what I mean by that is they believed in citizen government. They believed in citizen legislators, where we would elect neighbors from among us to go and represent us for a brief time at the Capitol, and then come back and live under the laws they've passed among those they represent. It's not uncommon to go to the grocery store and have people say, hey, about that bill you guys passed. And that's wonderful. On a personal level, my wife and I have 3 grown children and 8 grandchildren, 7 here, 1 in heaven, I'm sad to say. We lost a grandbaby a couple of years ago, but we have another one on the way. So we are very blessed. It's a privilege to serve, and I ask for the vote of the citizens of our district to continue to serve them in the House of Representatives.
Thank you. Candidate Olson.
Hi, I'm Christopher Olson. I'm from West Fargo. I'm also a candidate for North Dakota House from District 13. And presently I serve as president and CEO of Treasure Island Coins. Treasure Island is a company that my father started back in 1976. He is a 3rd generation North Dakotan. I'm a 4th generation North Dakotan. And so ever since his grandfather came over from Norway, we've been involved in business as a family. And I grew up around precious metals, finance, rare coins, currencies, and that sort of thing. And so after I did some service in the United States Army, active duty infantry, I spent time in Fort Drum, New York, as well as Seoul, South Korea. And after leaving the military, I came home to join my dad and get to work at business. And so in the 15 years now that I've worked for him, I've taken the company from 4 full-time employees to nearly 30 today and increased sales exponentially. And so I have an intense interest in politics and economics and finance, and I look to go to the legislature to keep North Dakota strong. I have a great love for this state and for the people of this state. I think that we are perhaps the greatest state in the nation. I can't think of a better one, and we're a shining light in these dark times economically. And so North Dakota is in a great position to carry the rest of the nation forward and to be an energy and an agricultural powerhouse, a finance powerhouse, a jobs powerhouse. And so I'm very interested to take the experience that I have in business, economics, and finance to the North Dakota legislature if I'm elected. My wife Lisa and I live in West Fargo. We have 5 children, and we're both lifelong West Fargo residents, and so I'd be grateful for the people of District 13 and consideration for their vote, and thank you all very much for coming and for tuning in.
Thank you. Candidate Stofferent.
Yes. My name is JC Stafford. I'm running for the House in District 13. I'm a born and raised North Dakotan, love the state, love my community in West Fargo. I had the opportunity to represent North Dakota as Miss North Dakota USA in 2012, and that opportunity led me to travel the state more, to learn even more about it and become even more in love and passionate about it. And in the last legislative session, I saw so much go radical and extreme, and my hope is to bring more of a balance back into the legislature. I consider myself more of a middle-of-the-road candidate and somebody who wants to work across the aisles. I had the opportunity of interning for Senator Conrad in 2008, and again, as Scott had mentioned, I had a great example of what effective leadership was in reaching across the aisle and working together to make a better North Dakota. And I hope that you will consider me along with my running mates for this next election.
Thank you. Candidate Deutsch.
Thank you. And this makes the break there. This is District 45, and I'd like to welcome all the West Fargo candidates into North Fargo. 45 is currently called North Fargo, District 45, but we actually include West Fargo, Riley's Acres, Argusville, Harwood, so it truly is a combination of urban and rural. So welcome into North Fargo. My name is Mike Deutsch. I'm born and raised in North Fargo. When I was growing up, the town ended at 19th Avenue North. So I've been here a while, and this is my home, and I'm not going anywhere. The house where I live now was a farm field when I grew up. There was a gravel road out to the golf course, which is just beyond where I live. I went to Northside schools. I started at Washington, went through Holy Spirit and Shanley High School, and I graduated from college here in North Dakota. I've been married 41 years. My wife and I raised our children here. She's been an elementary teacher in North Fargo for over 20 years, so our roots are deep. This is where we're from, and this is where we're going to stay. I've owned a small business since 1974. I finished college in 1973, and I've run an office supply business in North Fargo, and I'm an independent contractor, and raised three kids in the Fargo Public Schools. They all got advanced degrees here in North Dakota, and they're staying here. And I want North Dakota and Fargo to be a place where they want to live and work, and that's why I'm interested in here. 6 grandchildren. I never thought I'd run for political office. Why did I get into this race? My folks, Tom and Bert, taught me at an early age that you got to work in the community and make it a better place for the next generation. And that's what I'm trying to do. I want my kids to want to live and stay here. Besides being a small business owner, I've been a football, basketball official in the area, and I do independent contractor. That's what I am. So I should be able to and will be able to reach across the aisle in Bismarck to work with the Republicans to get business done. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Storbog.
Thank you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for this opportunity tonight and the other candidates that are here tonight. I am the sitting senator now for District 45. I was first elected in 2010. I'll go back with a quick bio. I grew up in Argusville, North Dakota on a farm. And then I graduated from Argusville High School, which doesn't exist anymore like a lot of the small schools. And I went to Concordia College in Moorhead. After that, I married my wife, Carla, who was sitting way in the back there. And we decided to make our home in Fargo. So after about a year of marriage, we bought the house, and we're still living in it now over 30-some years later. I farmed for 23 years during that time and commuted from Fargo. And then later on, a few years back, my wife started a business, and now I work with her, and we're a real small business, hand-on people with a couple employees, and we work real hard. I've been involved in the community always. I grew up in a family that was involved all the time. I've been on elevator boards with Chamber of Commerce committees. I was park commissioner for many years in Fargo, and now I'm a sitting senator. And that's an important part of making my community better. As a senator, I sat last session on the Industry, Business, and Labor Committee, and I vice-chaired the political subdivision. During the interim, I sat on taxation, government finance, legislative management, and I chaired government services. So I was very involved in the interim, getting ready for this next session coming up. And because of my rural background, my urban background, and the involvement I have, and the fact that District 45 is about a third rural, I think I'm uniquely qualified. I understand the differences, the needs. We have an agriculture sector to our district, and that's important, and we do have the cities of West Fargo and Fargo. And I think I bring a lot of qualifications to continue working hard. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Grishella.
Good evening. My pleasure to be here. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for the league to putting this on. This will be my third run at the House of Representatives in North Dakota. I ran in 2006 for the first time. I'm a retired state highway patrolman, and since that time I was retired, I was doing some private investigation work and did some sales and emerging equipment. And out of the blue, somebody came along and said, "Do you want to run for the House of Representatives?" And I was asked that on Friday. I had to know by Monday at 4 o'clock. So at Monday about 3:30, I went down and filled out the papers. So, but I hadn't really thought much about it until that time. But it's a very interesting process, and I'm really happy that I did run that time. My biography: I was born in Eccleston, North Dakota, back in. Well, I wasn't born there. I grew up in Eccleston, North Dakota, born in Jamestown, and went to college, or I got drafted during the Vietnam era. I rushed down and got into the Navy, enlisted, and they sent me to Vietnam Theater anyway. When I got back, I bounced around a little bit, a little confused, you know, like a lot of the Vietnam guys were, and joined the Highway Patrol and retired from that 25 years later. I did go to college when I got back on the GI Bill. Thank God they had because we didn't have any money to go to college. My dad died when I was 15, so I was pretty much on my own. I also graduated from the Northwestern University of Police Staff and Command, and did some graduate work at the University of North Dakota in political science, and received a Bachelor of Science, again, in education in 1975 from Valley City State. I'm a member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, American Legion, AMVETS, American Association of State Troopers, North Dakota Troopers Association, North Dakota Peace Officers Association. I was a past state director for the Law Enforcement Torture Hunt for Special Olympics. I was also on the FM Safe Communities Coalition for 14 years. I'm a board member of the North Country Trail Association, and been a member of Pheasants Forever for years. My wife and I like to hunt and fish. Speaking of my wife, that's a beautiful girl there with the blue scarf on over there. 41 years. We have 3 kids we raised here in Fargo. We moved here in 1989, and 5 grandkids. All our kids are here in Fargo, or my daughter's up at UND in Grand Forks. I've been on the Industry, Business, and Labor Committee and the Transportation Committee since elected in '06. There are 2 committees that are very different, but then again, they kind of fit me. The transportation, of course, I think I'll be the only law enforcement member in the legislature now after Senator Leeson retires. So I'll be carrying the ball for traffic safety and trying to get some of the bad drivers off the road in North Dakota that I've been working with for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you. And Candidate Warren.
Good evening. I'm Brenda Warren. I'm running for District 45 House. I'm married to Greg Warren. Been married for 38 years. We have 3 children and 7 grandchildren. The 7th one just arrived this past Sunday and weighed in just over 3 pounds. Both mom and baby are doing great. I graduated from Minnesota Technical College in Business Administration, and then I furthered my education at Concordia College, where I worked for 17 years. I'm currently the executive director of Cass County Historical Society in Bonanzaville, and I am also well-versed in the broad spectrum of issues that confront government. I was a West Fargo City Commissioner for 8 years and also a City Councilwoman for the City of Riverside. And I want to thank you to the League of Women Voters for holding this forum, and thank you for coming out, the audience members, and for the TV viewers viewing. Thank you.
Thank you. So for our first question, we will start with candidate Lee. And we had a number of questions related to early childhood education in North Dakota. And I think of the many that we received, the one that kind of sums up really the heart of all of the questions is, how would you ensure that every child in North Dakota has the experiences and early education needed to be successful?
I think it's important to note that we are in one situation here in Cass County, which would by North Dakota definitions be urban, compared to Slope County, or even in the oil patch. Excuse me. We have just recently fully funded, made available funding for full-day kindergarten, which I think is a real step in the right direction. We've had it for some time in the Fargo and West Fargo schools, available first on a limited basis and then more broadly. But it isn't something that you can move from full-time kindergarten to full funding of preschool or pre-K immediately. And part of the reason is there are some really long bus rides for those young children who are in the rural areas. There are opportunities for learning that don't necessarily need to be in the structured school environment. And we are encouraging some of those. There's really a nifty program that is handled through the State Extension Service, the name of which just escapes me, Growing for Kindergarten or something. But it's a wonderful interactive family program that assists parents of children who are pre-K and preschool age to learn if they're in an environment or in a community that doesn't have pre-K available. But if I were the parent of a 3-year-old and I was looking at that child being, or a 4-year-old child being on the bus for even 45 minutes each way, I think that's exhausting for a child that age. So I think it's really important that we not take for granted in our part of the state that it's exactly the same setting for people in every other part of the state. It is something certainly that the legislature will continue to review, because we know that those little sponges soak up all kinds of good things in those early years. But we do need to be creative. Sorry, Lois, I wasn't looking left.
Thank you. Candidate Brand.
Well, I think our state needs to make investments into pre-K education. Right now, we're one of the few states that does not make such investments. We have West Virginia, Alabama, and Arkansas funding their pre-K education programs. I'd like to think that we are at least as progressive as they are. Studies have shown that children who receive pre-K funding go farther along their educational path, get better paying jobs, and are less likely to commit crimes. I think that this is an investment we have to make. As Senator Lee said, these little minds are like sponges. They're ready to learn, and I think we need to give them that opportunity. It costs a little bit in the front for us to pay for the pre-K education, but it's an investment that's going to bring returns back well beyond the time that they're in school. So thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Koppelman.
I think it's important with the number of candidates we have here tonight and the number of questions to be brief. So I'll just say that I think Senator Lee summed up my sentiments pretty well, very well, in fact. And the best educators in a child's life, especially a pre-K child's life, are his or her parents. And it's not to say that pre-K is not a good investment. It's not to say that we shouldn't do it. I'm certainly willing to consider that. But as one legislator said, we shouldn't back the school bus up to the maternity ward and hand the child over to the school at that point. The home is a very important place for children to learn. We can't forget that. Do we need to offer pre-K? Absolutely. And it is offered around our state, as Senator Lee said. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Olson.
I'd like to echo both Senator Lee and Representative Koppelman's comments. Both precisely represent my views. And I do believe that in the state right now, we do have the option, and so that is available to the local school districts to provide for that. And so it's not necessarily a matter of the state getting in and funding it or mandating it. Mandating it would certainly be a mistake, I believe. But it is an option for those school districts that do wish to provide it, and state funds have already been provided to subsidize schools in a large number of ways. So in effect, we are essentially providing funds to schools, and those schools that do wish to offer pre-K are able to. And so this is a good example of local control and local decision-making that can happen in your school district.
Thank you. Candidate Stofferan.
I do believe we should fund early childhood education. We are, as Scott said, one of the few states with no state funding, and I feel that that is unacceptable. I want to give our kids the best start that they can have, and I'm lucky enough with my dad in the back. My family sent me to pre-kindergarten training, and I think I turned out pretty well. But, I mean, West Fargo alone had additional 500 students this year, and we know that kids are going through the school system quite rapidly here. We have so many, and it's growing so fast. And I think it's important that we support them from an early age. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Deutsch.
I've got 3 teachers in my immediate family. My wife was a 5th grade teacher, my daughter's a 2nd grade teacher, and my son was an elementary Phi Ed teacher. So I know the importance of pre-K education. Preschool equals success in school. If they go to preschool, they're going to succeed. They're less likely to require special services once they get into the system. If they're reading proficiency, they're more likely to graduate from high school if they have this pre-K. And as the Republicans like to say, you know, common sense, that's an ounce of prevention, and it's worth a pound of cure. So if we get them, you know, at an early age, that get them acclimated to a school setting, they're going to be successful. Nationwide, we're one of 8 states that don't fund preschool. So, and the brain develops significantly by age 6. So we've got to fund pre-K. I'm totally for it. North Dakota, 64% of our kids have no formal education before kindergarten. So we need to fund pre-K. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Sorbog.
Excuse me. I also agree that there's an important place, and the important place is that we have it set up through the school districts, and each local district can make determinations. And that's why last session I was a co-sponsor on Bill 1429, which did pass, which allows all the school districts to set up pre-K if they want. The only thing missing from the bill is money. And the initial bill that we put in did put $5 million to help lay the seed for these school districts to start it. So yes, I'm committed to it. I think it's important, but I think it needs to be the choice of each school district if it fits their needs and how they want to do it. And I think the state at this time, if a district wants to, that we do put some seed money in to help them getting going. And like I said, I was a sponsor on it before, and I would definitely be supportive of funding some money into it. It's already in the law now. Now it's a matter of putting some money in to help it go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Grishella.
West Virginia is ahead of North Dakota. Have you ever been to West Virginia? To say it's back, never mind. But I too have some educators in my family. My wife's an elementary teacher, and you know, I don't know too much about engineering, so if I have an engineering question, I go find an engineer. Well, here we have an education question, and we should listen to the educators. And all the ones that I know and the things that I read say pre-K is a great investment. Minnesota started it now, I guess, this last year. We can afford to do it, we should be doing it, and we should fund it at the state level. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Warren.
You know, study after study after study shows that programs such as Head Start makes our children successful. And what is our most valuable asset? Our children. So why are we not investing in them? We need to fund pre-K and programs such as Head Start. I can't imagine why we wouldn't invest in something so important. There's other things out there if we needed to cut back on other things, but we need to fund pre-K and Head Start. And just to let you know, not only that, but the milk program. There were children that couldn't afford milk. And again, that was voted down by the state. And that's another program that needs to be funded by the state.
Thank you. Candidate Lee. Oh, I'm sorry.
I think,
Larson.
I was going to say, whoops.
I think it'd be real important to fund the pre-K. Education is the key to getting you places where you need to go. It helps equalize opportunity out there. And with so many parents both working jobs, it would also help alleviate some of the costs of daycare for them too. So I think it would serve more than one purpose, so it'd be money well spent.
Okay, thank you. So our next question, we will start with candidate Brandt. And our question is, please explain how you would prioritize budgeting and spending, investing the state's inevitable surplus.
Well, it kind of echoes back to the question we just had. I think our number one priority needs to be that of our children. So I think investing in pre-K is a huge thing to invest in, but we need to look at the entire spectrum of education. We need to look at the K through 12 budget and see where we can make responsible investments to make our education a world-class institution that the rest of the states can look up to. I also think we need to look at higher education as well. I recently graduated from college a few years ago, and I don't see any reason why my house loan should have a higher percentage rate than my student loans. Our state has enough finances right now. We don't need to be putting extra burdens on our students who are trying to get out into the workforce and trying to get ahead in life. I think we should lower the student loan rate with our state bank down to something closer to 1% that can allow our students to get ahead, get a good start, and make North Dakota a great place for our students to stay.
Thank you. Candidate Koppelman.
It's a very important task, some would argue the most important task of the legislature, to appropriate dollars. The legislature has the power of the purse and has the opportunity today in these booming times in North Dakota to prioritize and decide where money will be spent. It also has an opportunity to be responsible, an obligation to be responsible with those dollars. I think the legislature is doing an excellent job of that. Do we make mistakes? Are there arguments over a tug and pull over where each dollar gets spent? You bet. I spent 4 years in the Appropriations Committee, and as I mentioned at the previous forum we had a few moments ago, one of those sessions there was a minor shortfall, about $50 million. The next session we served, there was a minor surplus. I say minor because it was dwarfed by today's standards. And I found out that when there's no money and you say no, people understand no. And they're not so worried about spending more. But when there's money there, whether it's a small amount or a large amount, everybody has ideas about how to spend it. And for every dollar there are 10 hands out. And it's the job of the legislature to make those priority decisions and decide where those dollars are spent. And we listen to the people that we represent when we do that. That's an important part of how our legislature works. And the people have been wise with our surplus, including passing the Legacy Fund, which I actually presided over the forwarding of that measure to the ballot. And the people passed it for a very good reason, that in boom times it's wise to set some money aside so that our children and grandchildren have a better North Dakota to live in.
Thank you. Candidate Olson.
Without having been involved in state legislature at this point, I don't have a good concept exactly of where all the money is and where it needs to go. That being said, I do have ideas about how it should be spent. And first of all, the state should truly not try to grow to become all things for all people. We need to provide for those most necessary services that people cannot provide on their own, or that cities and counties cannot provide on their own. With the budget surplus that we do have in North Dakota, we are a shining beacon of prosperity. And so we need to maintain the leanness and the efficiency of our government. I think that the budget surplus would be well served to be held by the Bank of North Dakota to make it available to provide low interest rate bonds, portions of which could be paid off by various revenues from oil and gas. And there are many different ways that we could set aside these funds and save them. So we have to be careful about how we go about investing. Infrastructure, finance, and maintaining a strong economy are part of the key roles of the state. And as it stands right now, the state is currently funding about 80% of K through 12 education. So that sounds like a pretty good number to me. And we've provided quite a bit of subsidies to local schools and other districts. And so I think we're on a good track, and I would love to see it continue that way, but it's going to require a lot of wisdom and thought.
Thank you. Candidate Stofferan.
Thank you. Something that I think we should invest in is child daycare. Prior to 2012 session, a survey showed that there's a $28 million need in oil counties. And while West Fargo is not in the oil county, I think we can relate in that West Fargo is growing so fast. It's fastest in the state. And legislation proposed a $15.5 million bill for statewide to support child daycare, and only $1.3 million was approved. And I think that in West Fargo, our families are needed in the workforce, and we need to make sure affordable daycare is available. We want to have the opportunity for both parents to be able to use, or we have like very low unemployment in West Fargo and in North Dakota, and we need those jobs to be filled. And if a parent has to choose between going to work or taking care of their child because they can't afford both, I think there's a problem there. On top of that, I think there needs to be more scholarships for North Dakotan students, lower no interest rates, and keeping tuition down. North Dakota has some of the highest student debt in all of the U.S., maybe the highest, which Scott kind of talked about when he was talking about his house loan payments. I think we need to fully fund the formula and support the infrastructure of our universities across the board.
Thank you. Candidate Deutsch.
Well, I don't want to address spending surplus. Our budget, it should be driven by what we need to fund. And to me, we just talked about pre-K. I'm for that. Education in K-12 also needs to be funded better. Special education needs funding. We in Fargo and Cass County, we've got English learner language that needs extra money, and so we need to take care of those. And whether we have surplus money or not, we need to get that funded. And then further on to higher education. NDSU and technical colleges, they need to be more accessible and more affordable. We need to figure out a way to get the tuition to stay low without raising it so much, and get a student loan that's affordable, that these kids don't come out with mountains of debt and then have to worry about how they're going to pay those off. Property tax relief, hopefully we can figure out a way to get a sustainable tax relief and take care of the homeowners, the renters in North Dakota. And last, in our area, flood protection is something that we really need to address. Fargo needs to be protected. It's our turn. Wapton's been helped, Grand Forks has been helped, Minot's been helped, and now it's Fargo's turn. We sent people, we sent materials there when they needed help, and now it's time for Fargo to get their help. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Sorbach.
Well, it's hard to just say one, but I think we did make a lot of good prioritizing last session. We're funding 80% of the cost of educating the kids. We redid the funding for higher ed. NDSU now has equity. And we have a program that provides scholarships, and I know there's programs out there that are going to provide more scholarships. Because the important thing, everybody's talking about the interest rate. We need to come up ideas and reward the students that are willing to work hard to keep their debt down by helping them that way, instead of just saying, we'll borrow you the money and then give you cheap interest. But I think one of the most important is tax relief. It's critical. What does it do? It provides money so people can make their own decisions. They can take the extra money, pay for their daycare. They can put it towards their students' education. There's a lot of opportunities, and that's why we have to continue tax relief. We don't have to solve everything as a state, but we have to work hard to give opportunities to our residents to solve them themselves. So they're close. Education's always big, but tax relief is huge. And we did do part of it permanent with the K-12. That's not going anywhere. That 80% funding is staying.
Thank you. Candidate Grishella.
Don't talk to me about student loan debt. I've got a son in the second year of medical school, and my daughter is getting her last year of her PhD. They've got debt. I was at a door in Riley's Acres last night, and the gentleman was telling me his daughter just got her master or doctorate in audiology. She's $200,000 in debt. Now, student loans run about 6%. You can get a home mortgage for 3.5% or 4%. The banks are borrowing money at 0.5% from the Fed and giving it to our students for 6. Now, student loan shouldn't be the cash cow here. It just doesn't make sense. It puts them too far behind. So, you know, we have the Bank of North Dakota. We have the profits, which we don't use normally. We've just been leaving them in there. We used to sweep them out, but now we just kind of leave them. That's money that should be used to buy down student loan debt. Now, I've heard people talk about, well, we can probably give them free loans, but I would rather, if we bought them down, get them down to about what a home mortgage is, and maybe they'd have a chance to pay them off. I'd also like to see some investment in the quality of life in North Dakota, and you can look at that 1,000 ways, but I think people that are coming here from other states expect more. We have 0 paved bike trails in the state of North Dakota, dedicated bike trails in the state of North Dakota. We had a great environment. I think the environment in North Dakota was very clean. Our water was clean. That's changing. We need to monitor that. We need people in the health department and environmental people to make sure that when this boom is over, there's something left. Education is the key to the future. When the last oil well shuts down, if we have a highly educated workforce, we're going to be able to compete in the world environment. If we don't, we're going to be, if all we have left is people who work in the oil business, they're going to be gone and we're going to be left holding the bag. So we need to invest in education. That's our should be our number one priority, all the way through K through 12 and college, and get our kids educated for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Warren.
My top concern for North Dakota is to increase property tax relief for property homeowners. And of course, I too have 2 daughters heavily in debt from their college loans. So I agree, we have got to get those interest rates down. But one of the other things that we really need to do is we need to reach across the aisle, and Republicans and Democrats have got to come together and compromise and get things done. Because you look at the national level, you look at the state level, and it's just dysfunctional. Let's not leave it up to one party to make all the decisions. Let's reach together, let's compromise, let's get things done. That's what the citizens want us to do. You know, when it comes to determining what needs to be prioritized, we know that the western part of the state needs a lot of infrastructure. They need more law enforcement, more schools, and of course, better railroads, way safety. And the eastern part of the state, we're in need of better flood protection, you know, increased funding for education, and again, railroad safety. So there's a lot of issues out there, but we have to come together and we've got to work together.
Thank you. Candidate Larson.
Yeah, I have to echo all the comments on putting money into education. It's a very good investment. And also infrastructure, the sooner that we can do a lot of these infrastructure projects, such as the flood diversion and such, every year things get more expensive. So the more that we can do now, the better off we'll be in the future.
Thank you. Candidate Lee.
In the first place, we put $2.3 billion with a B into the oil patch for infrastructure in the last session, and there will be significantly more recommended for this session. So there is a lot of concern in the legislature for what's happening out west. I think it's important to know that. I believe the word inevitable was used in the question, inevitable surplus. And that absolutely has to have a comment on it because it isn't an inevitable surplus. In the first place, briefly, there are several constitutionally designated funds into which the money flows. And among them are the State General Fund, the Property Tax Fund, which is what funds all of these property tax relief programs we have. Keep in mind the state does not levy property taxes. The local political subdivisions do, cities, counties, schools. So we have to do our subsidies of these various entities in order to relieve property taxes on the local level. But the Strategic Investment and Improvement Fund is a place from which water projects, both good water and flood control come from, disaster relief, and the Legacy Fund. So those are all designated funds into which money flows, and it has to be kept there for a certain amount of time. So it's important for us to realize that there has been some very good planning by previous legislatures on how to make sure we don't spend every nickel we've got, and then when the price of oil drops and we have to suffer reductions in the oil taxes coming in, we will find that we're not ill-prepared.
All right, thank you. So I just had a note passed to me that I did not read the word correctly, although it was enviable, not inevitable, although I would not have guessed that from reading the question. But that's okay. I think that's still a valid point, Senator Lee. So our next question is going to go with candidate Koppelman. What problems and solutions would you identify related to moving crude oil by rail in North Dakota?
Well, it's an excellent question. There's no question that Bakken crude moving on the rails has put pressure on that mode of transportation. And there's no easy answer, there's no easy solution, but there are a lot of good ideas out there. One that I'm sure you've all heard about is reinforcing the rail cars to make them stronger. Another is to stabilize that fuel before it's shipped. I think a big part of the answer is our pipelines, because if that oil is sent down a pipe underground, it's a lot safer, a lot better for the environment. There's a lot less potential for accident, and you know, that oil will move several ways. It'll move by rail, it'll move by vehicle, by truck, and it'll move underground if we can get Keystone built and some other pipelines. So there are a lot of answers to that question, but I think it's important. The other part of the question that a lot of folks are familiar with is that even though we're in urban districts here, our farmers need to get their commodities to market. And the oil lines, you know, Warren Buffett's making a lot of money at BNSF, and good for him. But we're having trouble now getting our agricultural commodities to market because of all the oil that's being shipped. It's a great problem to have, but it is a problem and one that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Candidate Olson.
Well, the free market is typically the best mechanism for solving a logistics problem, and there are a number of investments that are looking to be made that really government is getting in the way of. So if it weren't for different aspects of the federal government and other state governments, there's a lot of pipeline that could have been laid by now. But as it is, we have all this oil in North Dakota and a massive demand for it globally. And so even though we've kind of pushed the price of oil down with our production, and we're adding national security value as well to that, but with all the oil that's here, it's got to get there somehow. And so we're competing for rail traffic with the agricultural sector, and that's not good. So why can't we get these pipelines built? We've got oil, we need to move it. Government's been getting in the way. The free market provides a solution, money wants to go in, invest it in these, allow these pipelines to be built, because the money wants to flow and the oil wants to flow. So the free market has a solution, and I think government just needs to get out of the way. Part of what we can do here in North Dakota to make that happen is to have the PSC, the North Dakota Public Service Commission, take over some of the regulatory duties of rail and pipeline here in North Dakota that the federal government is mishandling. We have some very competent PSC commissioners who are looking to provide that type of oversight of regulatory systems for the rail and oil. So I'm in favor of finding solutions for that.
Thank you. Candidate Stofferan.
I will say that this is something that I think I can agree with my opponent, Kim Koppelman, on in many points. I think the North Dakota, well, it's a fact that the North Dakota light crude is very volatile, and it was scary when that train combusted around Castleton. Had that happened somewhere else in the middle of Fargo, it could have been extremely terrible, and it's terrifying when you have families here. I do support pipelines that are constructed safely. I believe that the Sandpiper pipeline needs to be approved. I think the Keystone could be beneficial. But again, if this oil could be treated to be less volatile, I think that's something we should look into before it goes on train cars. And I think that those could be constructed better as well to keep our constituents safe.
Thank you. Candidate Deutsch.
It's going to be a broken record. I agree with what's been said. You know, moving that crude oil, it's volatile. We've got to make it safer, and how we do it is up to us. You know, we stabilize the cars. Do we reinforce the cars? Do we do the pipeline? They're all issues that have their pluses and minuses. The pipeline safety. Everybody thinks that pipeline is going to be the answer. Well, not if it's going to be in my backyard. We've got a lot of people that don't want it going through their property. So we've got problems there. And for us in District 45, you know, crude oil is a problem, but we are dealing with getting fertilizer in the spring and getting a crop in the fall. So the rail needs to be regulated. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Sorbog.
It's simple. We need more pipelines. And if there's objections, you work through them. That's what a government does for the safety of their citizens. Because that's the only way you're going to open it up for the farm products to move is get some of the oil cars. The safety is a whole different issue. And a lot of that needs to be looked at. And I think from the state level. We just, in our government finance last week, Lim Helms was there, and we talked about this subject. And conditioning with the right temperatures at the wellheads can take care of a lot of the problems by burning off the butanes. We don't have to make this complicated. We just need a few more guidelines and a few more rules, and we'll have good, safe oil, and we can move it through the pipelines or on the rails, but the pipelines is how you help agriculture, not by building heavier cars, which are necessary too, but we have to get the oil trains off.
Thank you. Candidate Grishella.
Thank you. I think I just heard we need more regulation in North Dakota.
Good regulation, not more.
Local.
DOT 111 cars were never designed to haul anything combustible or as volatile as Bakken crude is. A lawyer from the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad was in front of our interim committee, and I asked him who was liable for these explosions, and he didn't like the word liable because he's an attorney, but they knew, they knew that this stuff coming out of the ground was volatile, but they put it in these DOT 111 cars anyway. So I think there's going to be some real class action suits in Canada. I guess they're already pending, and in North Dakota. And there should be. Somebody failed here, and nobody wants to take responsibility. Pipelines are good, but to say that they're the answer, that pipeline that went through down by Cogswell, North Dakota, Keystone 1, the first year they guaranteed that there wasn't going to be any leaks. There was 12 leaks in that pipeline the first year. A rancher farmer down there came home one night, and there was oil shooting 6 stories in the air right by his farmhouse. And he called the pipeline company and says, "You got a bad leak down here." And they said, "No, we have equipment here. We don't have a leak." And you can look that up. And he said, "Yes, they do." And they got out there and closed it off. So to say that they're the ultimate answer isn't really true either. I should add that they have changed the placards, and they changed on the DOT 111 cars. They changed the class, so they are a little bit more, and they're trying to stabilize them more. But the answer is safer cars. You can't put volatile. There's a lot more things volatile going down the railroads than Bakken crude, but they're in cars that are stable. So we can fix that problem, yes. We need some more regulation. The Sandpiper pipeline, I went to the PSC hearing up in Grand Forks on that, and there were some real concerns. It's going to run right south of Grand Forks, under the Red River. And the people in Grand Forks, some of them were saying, "Wait a minute, you know, this is our only water supply. We're coming out of here, yet you're going to run it." And there was a suggestion to put an oil bridge, and that just runs it across the river above ground. And the gentleman there that was presenting said, "This is safer because if there is a leak, you can see it. If it's underground, you don't know. It'll be a half a mile underground pipe there." So, you know, there are real questions. I think the Native Americans up in northern Minnesota in their rice fields have a genuine concern, and I think we have to listen to all that and get that all ironed out. And I'm not sure that one will ever get through. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Warren.
You know, until the pipelines become a reality and are up and running, we need to ensure the public safety. And we can't let the railway people monitor themselves. What we need to do is we need to have state-funded inspectors that can go out and make sure that strict guidelines are being followed so that the public safety is ensured. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Larson.
I think stabilization of the crude oil would be a big plus. I hear a lot of talk about pipelines, but as far as I know right now, they're not even using all the pipeline capacity that they have. because it ties them down the marketplace, and they're gonna send the crude oil to wherever they can get the best bang for the buck. But something needs to be done because the farmers are having trouble moving their crops to market, and it's not gonna get any better. So we need to do something in this regard. More pipeline capacity would help, but it'd be nice if they'd use what they had. That would be a help also.
Thank you. Candidate Lee.
I have little new to add. It certainly is important that we look at the Keystone Pipeline that would have been built a long time ago if the administration had permitted it to move forward. The EPA, all of which has current presidential appointees on it, has approved the route. But Nebraska, probably Warren Buffett's buddies, have thrown up obstructions to moving the Keystone Pipeline through an area which has now been approved again. So it's hard for me to understand why this wouldn't be a good idea. There are thousands of jobs that are going to be available if that Keystone Pipeline gets built. So it seems to me perhaps the environmentalists have more money than the workers' unions and others. So we need to look at a combination of ingredients. I'm glad to hear that state-supported inspectors are a good idea because that's exactly what Public Service Commissioner Julie Fedorchak has been recommending.
Thank you. Candidate Brand.
Well, I think a lot of what's been said already is dead on. We need to make the rail cars safer. It's obvious. Stabilization, that's another great idea. This is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. I grew up on a farm, and we need to open up that rail space for our farmers so they can get their product to market. Just this past week, I took a little break from the campaign trail and took my son out to the fields where my dad and brother were working so we could go on his first combine ride. You know, we're going up and down the field, and that's the issues that they both talked about right away. They obviously know I'm running. So they said, you know, you guys have really got to work on this because we are losing millions of dollars. Farmers across the state are losing millions of dollars with what's happening with our rail system. And we can't lose ourselves in this oil boom that we're in right now. It's a great blessing, but we need to remember that long after the oil's gone, our wheat fields are still going to be blowing in the wind. So we need to work with both parties, the railroad companies, local officials, federal officials, and provide means of transporting this oil safely. And I think together, if we all work together, get a round table, we can reach a very positive solution to this difficult problem. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next question will start with Candidate Olson. Where do you stand on the FM diversion? Would you vote to continue the currently appropriated $900 million from North Dakota?
The currently appropriated number, I believe, is it 900 million? As far as the FM diversion goes, that's an issue that I don't have a lot of color on. So it's something I don't have a very well-formed opinion at this point. It is a concern to a great number of voters in West Fargo, how they would be footing the bill for that. So I think what's important for me to express that going into the legislature, I would be very interested in providing money where it is needed, provided that we have a mechanism to ensure that we're not impacting other regions and other areas in a way that would be detrimental to them. Fargo needs to be protected, and the state needs to take part in that. Other agencies and other states also are a part of that effort, and so I'm certainly in favor of not pulling the plug because something has to be done, but we need to find a way to come to an agreement that's actually going to work. At this time, it hasn't come to that, so I don't have a lot of good advice at this point, but I would be very interested in examining that issue sincerely and honestly. Thank you.
Candidate Stopperan.
I do support the FM diversion. I don't think we can let what happened in Grand Forks happen here. And in West Fargo, we've been very blessed and lucky that we've had the Cheyenne diversion for the last 22 years. And, you know, maybe we're protected for the most part there, but a lot of our West Fargo residents work in Fargo, where we're not protected. And I think it's important that we, for our economic development and our future of North Dakota, that we protect that. I just don't think there's any reason why I would. I know that the diversion, you know, there's a lot of different ways that we could go about it or where we're going to put that. I kind of defer to our local leaders who have been working with this for years, whether it be our mayors or city commission. They've been working alongside those issues for a long time, and I look to them for a lot of advice and definitely look forward to learning more about it, but I do support it, yes.
Thank you. Candidate Deutsch.
Quite simply, it's got to be done. I lived on the north side of Fargo, and I lost a lot of neighbors, Woodland Drive area. Our golf course continually floods, and those are easy fixes. You know, the whole south side of Fargo now needs to be protected, and we've got to get it done. And it's our turn. Grand Forks, I went to school in Grand Forks, and when the flood came through there in '97, it devastated the town. You go up there, and the houses got orange paint on them, that this one's going to be gone. And it's taken Grand Forks a long time to recover, and we helped them. We sent people up there, and we did work up there. Minot, just the last couple of years, Minot needed help, and we stepped up. So it's our turn. Wapton and Breckenridge got taken care of. So we need to work with Minnesota to get it done, and we need to work with the downstream people. But it's in our best interest, and we have to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Storvog.
Just to clarify, it's $450 million, not $900 million that the state of North Dakota committed to the diversion. And 135 or 40 million of that is being done with the in-town protection, like the flood wall that's going to be out here and stuff. So but we have committed the state exactly what the diversion authority asked the state to commit to them. So North Dakota has not shorted the diversion authority. Am I a fan of the diversion? Yes and no. I think it's the right thing to get the protection that our local leaders decided our community needs. I hate the fact that 6,000 acres of good prime farmland is being taken up for it, but at the end of the day, we've got to do what's right for the larger population. And the other concern I have, and I voice this because a third of the diversion sits in my district, right in the north, going through the farmland. And I emphasize over and over, they have to be conscious to mitigate the problems. There's going to be problems caused by doing this. And I'm not against doing it, but we got to make sure we work hard to mitigate those concerns so we don't hurt any of our other neighbors. But at the end, the state has committed exactly what they've been asked for. And so they're not the ones shortchanging it. It's the Minnesota money and the federal money that's missing from the project.
Thank you. Candidate Grishella.
Thank you. Fargo has two water problems. One, we got too much water sometimes, and at other times we're going to not have enough water. We need to take care of both of these problems. We need to build that Red River Valley water supply project, the pipeline from Lake Skakawea. Otherwise, one of these days, we're going to be awful dry here. The diversion, as I stated earlier, I don't know too much about engineering or water, that type of thing. So I've been going to the flood meetings. I've been to the Red River Basin Committee meetings several times, and I listen to the engineers and the hydrologists, and they tell us that, and they're all convinced, they've been studying this for about 6 years. The Corps of Engineers, these are people who are experts in this field, and this is the only project that's viable. And I too have concerns. I have friends that live that will be behind the so-called Fargo Dam south, and I feel bad for them. But I think it's down to about 11 or 12 actually farmsteads that are going to have to be affected. So we can do this project. I think we're going to have to do it. Otherwise, you've heard the threats of $5,000 flood insurance policies for every homeowner in the state, and that's a fact. After 15, when they raise that level, the Corps raised that level, we're going to all have to start buying it unless you're protected to a certain level. So if there were a better plan somewhere, I think somebody would have come up with it by now. But I don't know about you people, but I haven't seen it yet. So I think this is the one we have to work on, and this is the one we have to get approved. And yes, the state will fund its share. We haven't, we haven't, we're not blood brothers with the feds, but Byron Dorgan stood in front of us in 07 or 09 session and said he guarantees $600 million from the federal government for this project. Well, he's gone, and we still don't have that $600 million. But I think we can. I think we will. We'll build this project. We have no choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Warren.
The Fargo-Moorhead diversion is vital to the communities. And Denny Wallaker has really taken the bull by the horns here. I mean, year after year after year, Fargo and Moorhead has flooded. It's a problem that's not going to be going away without the diversion. It's going to need the support of both states and also the federal government, and I think the federal government's appropriated the funds for the FM diversion, but has not yet appropriated the amount. And all these entities need to come together to make this a reality.
Candidate Larson.
Living in West Fargo, we know well how a diversion works. It's served us very well. A lot of people question as to why the district, West Fargo, needs to help pay for it, but I know that everybody that lives out in that district doesn't work in West Fargo. Most of those jobs are in Fargo, and they need to be protected. So I think the diversion is a very important thing for both cities.
Thank you. Candidate Lee.
West Fargo's had a very successful diversion, which protects to a 100-year flood level. And the FEMA maps are kind of in a constant state of change, so that's really an important thing. The flood control project we're talking about now, the bigger project that would affect the whole really Cass County area along the river, gives West Fargo protection too, just not at the same level as Fargo, but it would protect us to a much higher level and also cover water which, if the red floods at a particularly high level, could come at us from that direction too. So we do have a small share in this because of that. The U.S. Corps of Engineers has a whole lot to say about the way this project plays out. We're not totally thrilled with the route around a part of the area in West Fargo, but we, if we're going to have any federal engagement with this, we have to collaborate with the U.S. Corps. If you think about the '97 flood in Grand Forks being 17 years ago, and here we're still talking about this, it is time to get off the dime. We're working hard at it. But frankly, if it worked for Mark Bittner, the city engineer in Fargo, who is a remarkable engineer, and Daryl Vaniel and the rest of the people who are a part of that diversion committee, I can't imagine where we'd be. We have extraordinarily committed people from representing all of the various stakeholders in this operation, from both sides of the river, rural and urban, who have put in thousands of hours trying to find the answer for this. And I think we should be very grateful for the kind of work that they have done. I think we should support their efforts in trying to resolve the issues with the people who are still dissatisfied. But there is a point where we're going to have to move forward with something that is terribly important to the area.
Thank you. Candidate Brand.
Well, as many of us said, West Fargo already has great flood protection with the Cheyenne River diversion. That being said, I recognize that a flood in Fargo directly impacts the people of West Fargo and really the entire state. I remember back in 2009 when we had the flood, I actually got activated by my National Guard unit. Took me away from my job, took my soldiers away from their jobs. It cost all of our private employers lots and lots of money. And I think that it's something that we really need to look at. I have great skepticism right now about the current plans for the diversion. But that being said, I think there could be some adjustments that could be made. I could be convinced to vote for funding the project.
Thank you. Candidate Koppelman.
I feel a little bit like the fellow who said everything has been said, but not everything has been said by everyone yet. So let me try to hit a couple of other aspects of the issue quickly. I support flood protection for Fargo. I voted for the funding, the $450 million that was mentioned for the funding for the Fargo diversion. I'm concerned, I share the concerns that have been mentioned about some of the details of the plan, and I represent the taxpayers of West Fargo. We are already helping to pay for the Fargo diversion through the money the state is spending and also through the county sales tax that is paying for the diversion. Fargo, other than the state share, did not pay for the West Fargo diversion. So I know that I have a lot of constituents who are very concerned about any kind of property tax assessment that might come down the pike. That's a concern I intend to be very attuned to as the project moves forward. But make no mistake, Fargo needs flood protection. I think everyone on the panel has agreed, and I think the vast majority of legislators agree.
Thank you. So for our last question, we will start with candidate Stafferan. And the question is, should the oil extraction tax be lowered? And then just to explain your position.
You know, I don't believe it should be lowered. I believe that no matter what, if there's oil in the ground, the companies are going to come. And I understand that maybe there is one or two companies that would be lobbying for a lower oil extraction tax, but for the most part, I was listening, to a few different radio interviews with the leaders of such companies, and that's not what they're lobbying for. That's not their agenda. They know that their workers and their companies are working in these communities that need to be, their infrastructure needs to be insured, the safety needs to be insured, and when the oil is all done, they want communities to be left standing. I think it's an ethical issue of we don't need to be sending more money outside of our state to these oil companies that they're doing fine. I don't think they need a huge amount of cuts, and it's something that we can reinvest into our state. And I think from the discussions tonight, there's, like Kim said, there's a million things that we can be investing in, and there's always people asking for money, but there are responsible things to invest it in. And if we can keep that money in the state and reinvest it in those communities and beyond, that's what we should do.
Thank you. Candidate Deutsch.
Quite simply, no. We've heard that we need common sense in North Dakota. Well, common sense does not include sending that excess, is what they called it, to the oil companies in Texas and Oklahoma. It should be spent here in North Dakota. We could use that money for milk for children in school. We could use that money for other programs that we're saying that we don't have the money for, and by sending it to they're not going to leave. The oil is here. They're not going to go. When they do go, it'll be because there isn't any oil here anymore. So quite simply, no, I would not lower the tax, and we need to keep the money here in North Dakota. That's just plain nonsense. That's not common sense.
Thank you. Candidate Sorbog.
Well, I think the important thing, you can listen to political talking points, or you could actually do the math, because they're talking about a bill that the Senate passed. And this bill lowered the extraction tax from 11.5 to 9.5. But nobody talks about a fact it raised the stripper tax. That tax, this biennium, would have provided $35 million more, that bill, than what we have now. We are dealing with a 35-year-old complicated formula with, they call it triggers, but it's loopholes. And those loopholes, and now we've had oil go down $15, $20 a barrel, and eventually they'll hit those triggers. And then you're going to look at a lot less dollars than readjusting the formula. That's all this bill did. Just because you pay your income tax top end 25, you don't pay anything on your first 8. Your effective tax is what's important. This would have matched the effective tax that the oil companies are paying. This was no gift. Remember one thing about it. The oil companies did not want this bill. You read the Fargo Forum. The oil companies were opposed to this bill because they said, if you're going to do it, give us one that cuts the tax. You're not doing anything except down the road, we're going to have to pay more. Because the one trigger, the first one that kicks in, takes the extraction automatically from 6.5% to 2% for 2 years. So this was not a bad bill, but it sure made good talking points, but the math shows totally different.
Thank you. Candidate Grishella.
Back in 2007 or after one of the 2009 session, I can't remember exactly, I was on an oil tour up in the oil country, and afterward we went to one of the motels and we had some speakers. One of them was Harold Hamm, who was the president of Continental Oil, one of the biggest players in the Bakken in North Dakota. And he got in front of us and said that if we did, our taxes for oil extraction were too high. And somebody asked him, well, what will you do? And he said, well, we're drilling in other places that have lower taxes, in Louisiana, Wyoming, So he kind of implied that if we didn't lower our tax, they were pulling out. Well, they're still here, and we've expanded exponentially since that time. And on the way back, coming back, I was on a plane with Representative Carlson. I remember his statement saying, if I had to base my business plan on if a state is going to cut its oil extraction tax, I'd be out of business. So that was I think the oil companies did want that bill passed. There was a bus going around the state with some politicians on it lobbying hard for that bill to lower the tax, not the bill, but to lower the tax. So it would, I think council looked at it and they said it would have been billions of dollars. If they cut the extraction tax by 2%, it would have been billions of dollars over the life of the Bakken that would have went out of state. So cutting that tax is cutting our own throats. That's the money we can use for building our water supply project. That's the money we can use for the diversion. We can put that to good use.
Thank you. Candidate Warren.
The oil extraction tax should not be lowered. And let's not bow down to the oil companies. Let's distribute, like Ed said, to projects that benefit North Dakotans.
Thank you. Candidate Larson.
I don't think this would be a good time to lower the oil extraction tax. The oil boom is still in its fledgling states. You know, there may be a time in the future when it could possibly help, but right now I think it would be a very foolhardy thing to do.
Candidate Lee.
The information that Senator Sorvag gave you is absolutely correct. He and I are the ones who are in the Senate, were in the Senate, voted on this bill, and know what it said. And so you can have euphoric recall about what you may have heard it said, but what really was the case is what Senator Sorvag has reviewed. The closing of the loopholes, the taxing of the stripper wells who are low-producing wells so that they now are continuing to produce and would continue to be taxed would have been very important things. That trigger, if it's below $55 a barrel for 5 months in a row, they get a holiday, a tax holiday entirely for 24 months. That kind of thing is what would have gone away. The absolute truth from nonpartisan numbers people is that the amount of money that would have come to the state of North Dakota with that bill was greater than if it didn't get passed. So if you are interested in the facts, just go online and read what the bill said.
Candidate Brand.
One thing I'm extremely firm on is the oil extraction tax. Unlike my opponents, they actually did vote to lower the oil extraction tax to a point where it cost our state billions of dollars in revenue. I am not going to vote to lower the oil extraction tax until each and every corner of our state is positioned to move boldly into the future. We need to invest in our own state. As you've heard, my opponents mostly say today, if you look at the numbers, the final bill ended up in a way that it really didn't hurt our state. But let's be clear here. It was only after the giant public backlash and from staunch opposition that the supermajority changed its course on this bill and corrected it so the oil extraction tax was not lowered. You hear this double talk, right? I voted against it before I voted for it, and yada, yada, yada. It's not good politics. The fact is, a vote's a vote. They need to stand on their record, and they need to explain why they voted the way they did. With me, you'll get no double talk. I will not vote to lower the oil extraction tax until we're moving boldly into the future as an entire state. North Dakota deserves better.
Thank you. Candidate Koppelman.
I think the two senators have addressed this factually and very well. One thing to remember is that balancing tax policy and regulatory policy in the midst of the oil boom is a very delicate balance, and it's one that I think North Dakota regulatory officials and North Dakota legislators have navigated very well. The North Dakota tax, the North Dakota budget, is built on an estimate of $85 to $90 a barrel for oil. I think right now it's 66. So it gives you some sense. We also have the third highest oil extraction tax in the nation. Does that mean it should be lowered? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I'm going to look at all the factors because it's a lot easier to get oil from West Texas to the Gulf area to be refined than it is from the Bakken oil fields. We've already talked about rail cars. We've already talked about pipelines and the difficulty of getting our oil to the market. So a lot of these factors need to be considered. But make no mistake, North Dakota majority policies have helped spur the oil boom. In fact, Continental Oil was mentioned. I was sitting next to the chief engineer from Continental Oil a couple of years ago. He said, "How long have you been in the legislature?" I said, "I was elected in 1994. He said, "Do you remember the 95 session?" I said, "Yeah, it was my first session." He said, "Do you remember what you did with the oil tax?" I said, "Yeah, I remember we tweaked it a bit." He said, "Well, let me tell you the story. The way we do horizontal drilling, the way we do fracking in North Dakota was my idea. Never been done like this before. We had an idea. We thought we could make it work in North Dakota, but we couldn't afford to try the way your tax was. So we came to the legislature. We said, would you tweak your tax system just a little bit to allow us to experiment? And you said yes. And the next words out of his mouth are forever emblazoned in my mind. He said, if it were not for the fact that North Dakota has a business-friendly legislature, there would be no Bakken oil boom.
Thank you. Candidate Olson.
as far as things go right now, we don't need to lower the oil extraction tax. The market will bear it. That being said, what we need is a good pricing and trading acumen within the state legislature to understand exactly what the market will bear. This is a natural resource that is owned by the people in the state of North Dakota. And so we have a right to add a tax to it, and the market can bear a certain level of taxation. So we need to be able to get as much as we possibly can from the oil companies, while at the same time understanding that they can get it from other places. And so we have to look at our tax environment as a competitive type of organization where we're going to compete on price, we're going to compete on infrastructure, we're going to compete on the business climate, and that's what North Dakota needs to do well. We need to make money as a state and as a government to fund the states, the cities, the counties, the roads and the bridges, and all the other things that the oil companies are using to make profits. And so I support smart, agile, and efficient tax policies, which at this time do not involve cutting the extraction tax. The market will bear it, but it is a market function. Thank you.
Thank you. So to wrap up here, we will start with candidate Deutsch for the 1-minute closing.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for the opportunity to have this discussion. I think the questions were good, and the answers showed that all the candidates have done their homework. Listened to my opponents, and he's touted his incumbency re-election effort that he's been in the Senate, and cited several bills in that. I think what he didn't say is this oil reduction tax, and he voted for it. And if I did a quick count here, there's 11 people up here, and 3 people were in favor of that tax reduction, and that was the 3 people that voted for it. The other 8 here don't think it's a good idea, and I don't think it is a good idea for North Dakota. And that money could be spent in North Dakota on programs that Head Start. No milk for students. There's money that we can use, and we don't need to give it away to Oklahoma and Texas. So thank you for the opportunity tonight.
Thank you. Candidate Sorbog.
Thank you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters, and I want to thank the other candidates up here. And I've been on a lot of public boards, and I have a reputation. I use common sense. I do my homework. I look at the numbers, and I look at the bills. This is not a game. There's no rewards for a quick decision. You do your homework, and sometimes you make hard decisions if you think it's the best thing for the community. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong, but that's what the job is. This is a deliberative body. Yes, there's a lot that are trying to move it to, so we're just like 10-second, 15-second sound bites, and that's how you govern. Well, I think we've seen how well that's done with Washington, D.C. So if I'm reelected, I will work hard, I will do my homework, and you can ask me how I voted on any bill, and I won't just say I voted. I'll explain to you why I voted the way I did, because I will work hard at it. So I ask you for your vote for my reelection, and thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Candidate Grishela.
I echo the thanks of my the speakers here, thanking the league and everybody else for coming out here. It's fun to see some faces out here. The legislature is an odd animal. It's made up of some unusual people. Unusual? I guess I'm unusual, but there's a wide variety of people that are in that legislative body, and it's surprising. I see a couple former legislators back there that are laughing. But there are, we all seem to come together under the important issues. We have a lot of squabbles and we go back and forth, but at the end of the day, we usually come out of there with a pretty good product. This last session, it was a nightmare. We actually went over our legally authorized day limit because we were in the next day, but we covered the clock, or we did some crazy thing. But it's a struggle, and everybody said, hey, when you've got money, it's harder than when you don't, because you've got big decisions to make. North Dakota is in a enviable position. This is a one-time harvest out in the western part of the state. We have to do it right. We have to leave something for the next generations that come around. We don't want to just have some rusting old hulks out there and some abandoned roads when this is over. So we can do this. We can develop. We can grow the state, but we have to look. We have to look deep and do the things that are right for the future, not just for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Warren.
Again, thank you for the League of Women Voters for putting on this forum for us. It gives us the opportunity to express ourselves and our views. And in closing, I just want to tell you that being a past city commissioner and a city councilwoman, I was the leading force behind the city of Riverside to be consolidating with West Fargo, and that was because I saw we had a lot of duplicate services and that we were just wasting money. As a commissioner in West Fargo, I had to stand up to big tobacco and also under the pressures of the mayor and all the other city commissioners because they did not support the smoking ban. The state did not support a smoking ban. We went to them. We had to do it ourselves. And as you can see, what we did was we reached out to the people that we served. And being a representative, if elected, I would be voting and reaching out to you. And I can tell you that it's not an easy task because sometimes that means that you have to listen to the silent majority, not the vocal minority. And if elected, I would reach out to you, I'd engage you, I'd communicate with you directly, because if I'm going to go to Bismarck, I'm not going to Bismarck for me, I'm going to Bismarck for you. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Candidate Larson.
I want to thank everybody for coming. You guys gave us a lot of great questions. Thank the League of Women Voters for having us here tonight. I really think that the legislature has lost really the perspective of the common working people. There's a lot of things that need balance. We are pretty one-sided in our legislature. I'm sure everybody knows that. A little common sense would go a long ways. When I see bills passed and then appropriations made for the defense of the bills, I really got to question, are we doing the right thing? I hope that if I get elected, I will represent my district, and I will stay away from things like that cost extra money. I just don't understand why they have to be that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Lee.
Thank you to the League and to everyone who's here. I think it's interesting that we have in an hour and a half spent about half of it talking about obviously a focus on the part of our of one party on the oil extraction tax, but we haven't talked at all about the fact that between 1999 and the current biennium, we tripled K-12 education funding. We haven't talked about the fact we expanded Medicaid so that the lowest income people in the state who were excluded from the exchange subsidies on Obamacare could be covered for health care. We haven't talked about the fact that there has been nearly $2.4 billion in tax relief that has been provided since 2009. We haven't talked about the fact we have more strict DUI laws. We haven't talked about funding for home and community-based services to assist seniors and others with disabilities to remain in their home. We haven't talked about the prescription drug abuse programs. We haven't talked about an enormous behavioral health project that has just been completed that's leading to several bills that will be moved forward into the next legislative session that I look forward to shepherding through the Senate Human Services Committee and onto the House so that we can expand and develop workforce and appropriate services for mental health and substance abuse in North Dakota. We haven't talked about state trauma and emergency services as well as fire departments that have had significant additional funding for both training and equipment. So I think it's really important to know that there's a balance in what happens in the legislature. It's really like being in a blender, in my view. There's a whole bunch of unidentified, totally separate and identifiable objects that are thrown into the blender, and somebody hits puree, And when it comes out, it better be palatable to the people whom it's supposed to serve. That's what we do. You have a whole bunch of stuff in a whole bunch of committees, almost 1,000 bills that are handled during a session, and we work very hard to do our very best in each of the committees to get the job done for you, because we have to come home and work for that too. So I ask for your vote the last week in October or the first Tuesday in November. I look forward to carrying forward in the Senate Human Services Committee and in the Senate for you in District 13 in the next biennium.
Thank you. Candidate Brand.
Well, I wanted to thank the League of Women Voters again for hosting this forum. It's been great talking with everyone here. All of us, we've had great discourse, I think, on a variety of issues. So thank you for that. It's been great. I'd like to thank you, the voters, as well, for coming to this forum, for watching on TV, and being part of the political process. I think that's absolutely wonderful, and I'd like to see more of that happen. When I walk to the doors and speak to the people of West Fargo, the first question I ask them is, what's the most important issue to you? Because that's how I think our government should be run. It should reflect the issues that are important to the people. And most of the issues that are important to you are what's important to me. And I think that we need to work together, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, to make sure that our children have the best future possible in our state. Because after all, at the end of the day, we're all North Dakotan. I've had a great time talking to voters. I've greatly appreciated it. I've heard so many great stories about my family. From my mom, Deb, who I got a vote just because she's singing with someone in the choir. That was great. I didn't have to go through my whole spiel. She says, I know your mom. She's great. I'm voting for you. So my mom's here actually today. I'd like to thank you, Mom. You're earning me votes just for being a great person. So I appreciate that. I've heard stories also about my dad, Bruce, and the farm, and my grandpa, Elwood, baling hay. I never got to meet my grandpa. So hearing those stories about him, you know, it takes me back. You know, it's like my own personal Ancestry.com research in my home district. So I appreciate that, and to the voters of West Fargo, I thank you. Because I believe I can represent the people of West Fargo best, I ask for your vote this November, or as Senator Lee pointed out, the last week in October. But more importantly, regardless of who you vote for, I ask that you vote. It's not just your right, it's your duty. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Koppelman.
As I talk to people, and campaigns are a wonderful opportunity to do that, going door to door and meeting people at functions like this, they resonate with one sentiment. They say, keep doing what you're doing, because things have never been better. And it's morning in North Dakota. Some of you may remember Ronald Reagan's re-election campaign when he was our president, and his campaign was Morning in America. There was a journalist from North Dakota, a lot of people didn't know he came from North Dakota, named Eric Severide, who was a TV journalist. Again, if you're old enough, you may remember that name. He once described, he was from Velva, North Dakota, and he once described his home state as a rectangular-shaped blank spot on the nation's consciousness. And that's the way North Dakota used to be to a lot of people. When I was elected to the legislature, times were tough in North Dakota. There were a lot of challenges. We didn't have money. And it's been so exciting to see the growth and prosperity of our state and to participate in that. There couldn't be a greater contrast than looking at the left-leaning policies in Washington, D.C. and the dismal track record that they've left in their wake and the condition of our country versus how good things are in North Dakota. And I think it's important, as I talk to people, I had the opportunity to be chairman of the Council of State Governments, which is all 3 branches of government in all 50 states. And I know a lot of governors, legislators, judges, executive branch officials from all over the country, different states. And now, when the word North Dakota comes up, they say, what in the world are you people doing? Things are booming up there. They pull me aside at meetings and ask me that question. Things are great in North Dakota, and we want to keep them that way. North Dakota is booming, and again, the great contrast is something I think all of us have stepped back and looked at. This didn't happen by accident, and it won't stay that way automatically. The policies that we've enacted in the legislature have helped North Dakota prosper. So I thank you all for being here. I thank the League. I ask for the vote of my constituents in District 13 to continue to serve them in the North Dakota legislature. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Olson.
Well, again, I'd like to thank everyone who came out tonight to spend all this time with us. This is a very important process to be involved, and I would hope to see many more people in the future to get involved with our government, because this truly is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And in North Dakota, that couldn't be more true. We have a citizen legislature. You can find Representative Koppelman and Senator Lee's phone number, and to those of you who have met me as I've been out walking around going door to door, I've given a phone number out to every single person I talk to, and so we are accessible, and in this state, that's a great way to do government and to be engaged with the citizens, and so I look forward to having more discussions with you on the campaign trail, and if I'm elected, I look forward to hearing from you, and I want to hear from you. I want to be held accountable. I want to know what concerns you, and I want people to be involved. I'm a fourth-generation North Dakotan. I have 5 little fifth-generation North Dakotans running around my living room right now, and I have a lot of pride in this state, and we've become a beacon of hope in a rather abysmal economy, and I want to keep it that way. North Dakota is open for business. I want to see it run like a business. I want to make good decisions, hard decisions. If I'm elected, I want to bring my ability to collaborate with any individual and to deal with complex problems and to listen and to communicate and to find ways to move forward together. I like to get to the heart of the issue and propose the best possible solution for everyone. And I'm not just in this as a Republican. I'm in this as a North Dakotan and your neighbor. And I love this state. I love everyone in it, as well as all of my fellow candidates, my opponents, and I thank you all for coming, and I hope that I can have your vote for the constituents of District 13. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Stofferam.
I'll try to wrap this up briefly because I know we're probably going over time here. But, you know, I do, again, thank you to the League for having us, and thank you for everyone tuning in and everybody attending. I know it's a late night and you guys have your own things to do as well. And I know there's been a lot of constructive questions tonight. We really appreciate those. But the reason I'm running isn't because these constructive questions and issues were worked on ahead of other things. Last session, the GOP majority emphasized an emotionally charged social agenda at the expense of maximizing North Dakota's tremendous opportunities. And I think the term common sense has become pretty relative. And I'm here for real common sense. I am running for the legislature to bring not some radical legislation, not extremists. That's not who North Dakotans are. I want to represent the normal, common sense North Dakotan. Let's not forget what happened last session, and let's focus on what needs to be invested in North Dakota. When we are going to court to appeal unconstitutional measures and spending that money that we could be investing in our state, that's silly to me. Let's work for the North Dakotan. Let's bring it back home. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone in the audience that attended, and to all the candidates tonight. The candidates forum will be broadcast on Fargo Public Access, and I believe we have a plan to get it to West Fargo as well. And it will also be posted on the League of Women Voters website. So thank you, everyone, and thank you to the City of Fargo and to Jeremy, our person that has been responsible for filming us tonight.